emphasize yet again what we're focusing on in this section of the book of Colossians, because we're talking about doing life. It's a phrase that we'll throw around from time to time. Hey, you're doing life with other people. We're talking about relationships whenever you hear us use that kind of terminology. We're all living our lives, but we're doing it with other people. God has created us in community. He's created us to have relationships. And as He has saved us, the relationship that we have with Christ ought to be making such a difference in us that it is evident and seen in our relationships with other people. Our relationship with Jesus ought to be a difference maker in us. And this is especially true when we talk about the relationships that we have with those who do not yet know Christ or not a part of the community of faith. And that's what we're going to look at today. And Paul's going to break down this passage in a couple of parts. Maybe you've already seen it. One focuses on prayer. The other has to do with the sharing of the gospel. And so we're going to talk about two things today. How to pray for those that are outside of the faith, but also how to share the gospel with those that are outside of the faith. Now, we're going to begin with prayer, because Paul gives a sort of general command or charge or challenge to pray there in verse 2, when he says, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. And so it's interesting when you see this. If you read this entire book all at once, you may be more likely to see that Paul not only is concluding and beginning his conclusion, he's going to be making his journey toward the end of the book right here. In fact, some of the most substantial things that he's going to say is happening here in these verses. And he's going to give some concluding words about some fellow believers that we need to be mindful of. But really the conclusion begins here. And if you've read from the beginning all at once, you may have noticed that as Paul begins his epistle back in chapter 1, that Paul actually began with prayer and a call to pray. So he begins this letter with prayer and a call to pray, and now he's asking for prayer again at the end. And he says, continue steadfastly in prayer. Or as some translations put it, devote yourselves to prayer. So we're not supposed to simply pray, but we are to be devoted to prayer. Because devotion is a love word. We often use it in association with our relationships. It's a marriage word. It means to give something up to someone or something else, to be devoted to someone or something. And it really implies a single-mindedness. And so when Paul is saying to continue steadfastly in prayer, he is saying be devoted to prayer. Continue single-mindedly in prayer. It's like my marriage to Jennifer. She expects me to be single-mindedly devoted to her. That's how we are to pray. It is to be a first priority, to continually steadfast with a single-mindedness in our communication with God. And he doesn't just tell us to do this, he tells us how to do it. He says being watchful in it with thanksgiving. Thanksgiving for what? Well, your faith in Jesus. He's talking about salvation here. You're praying and you're devoted to prayer because Jesus did something for you. He died for you. He provided forgiveness for you. He has given you freedom from your sin. He's given you forgiveness. He's given you eternal life. And so you're praying with this devoted, single-minded, steadfast devotion to prayer because you're thankful to God for what He has done for you. You're thankful for everything. That's how you are to pray. And so we pray with a single-minded devotion, and our motivation to do so is because Jesus has done everything. It's just a way of us to express our gratitude to Him, our appreciation for all He has done for us. So He tells us this prayer, just pray, be devoted to it. Be praying steadfastly, devotedly because of what God has done for you. In thanksgiving, do this. But then He says, look, as you're praying this steadfast, devotional, and the like prayer, would you please pray for me? So here's Paul, this great apostle, writing to some younger, less mature Christians, but he is imploring them to pray on his behalf. Pray. As you're praying, pray for me. Pray for my ministry. Pray that God will open up doors for me that I might be able to clearly articulate the gospel. And what follows, beginning in verse 3, is what we learn how we can be praying for ourselves, that God would use us to speak clearly the gospel when opportunities arrive, and also how we are to share the gospel with those who yet to know Jesus. Now, the Bible uses a number of words to describe people that Sometimes the Bible refers to those without faith in God as sinners or transgressors or the unrighteous or the wicked, the godless. Sometimes it refers to those people without faith in God as evildoers. Some are less harsh, but still denote a negativity, referring to those without Christ as the lost or foreigners and strangers. All of these descriptions are talking about people who are outside of the faith, outside of a relationship with Christ, which is how Paul, that very word outsider, is a word that Paul chooses to use here in this text. You see, those who die as sinners, if they remain in their sin, they are outside the faith and will remain outside of the faith for all of eternity. And we don't want them to remain lost. We don't want them to remain outside of the faith, and neither does Paul, which is why he is asking for both prayer, but also providing a challenge to us to take opportunities to share the gospel. So, how do we do life with outsiders, with those outside of the faith, so that they are less likely to remain on the outside of the faith and be a part of the family of God? Well, that's what Paul is discussing in the following verses. So we're going to break this down again in two parts. Let's begin